Hey, hello, and welcome to the Content Advantage, a talk show about content for content professionals, folks just like you. I'm Scott Abel, and joining me today is my co-host, Megan Gilhooly. Hi, Megan.
Hey, Scott. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you. Under the circumstances, I think it's a beautiful day. I'm ready to tackle another episode of the Content Advantage with you.
Wrong show. Yes.
Wrong show.
Content Advantage. But it's great to see you. So thank you. And I want to introduce our fabulous guest. So today we have Denise Kadilak, who is the Senior Manager and Information Architect at Blackbaud. So Denise, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And where are you calling in from?
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I live in Cleveland.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be in Cleveland soon, and I suspect that Scott might too.
That might be a content marketing world thing. I think.
Oh, yes. Is it coming back?
Yeah.
See how things are going, and we'll
It'll be good.
that as it happens. And speaking of how it happens, if you're on today's show and you haven't used the Bright Talk platform before, here's a few things just to let you know. Today's show is being recorded, which means that you can come back at any time and watch this show on demand. So if you need to leave before the show ends today, don't fret. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do, and know that you can return to the same URL that you're using to watch the live show today, to watch a recording, or to share that link with other people who might benefit from seeing the show. Also, we can't see or hear you, so you don't have to worry about your microphone or camera. We do not have access to them. You can ask a question of Denise at any time by clicking the Ask a Questions tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. That will open up a little text-based window. You can type in a question for Denise and submit it that way. We won't be able to text you back the answer, so just be aware of that. But myself and Megan will queue up as many questions as possible and weave them into the interview with Denise wherever it's appropriate. And we've got additional content, including handouts and contact information for today's guest on the show, and some content provided by the software company that's a sponsor of today's show, Zoomin software, and we'll talk more about them later in the show. All right, Megan, let's do this.
Yes, let's do this for sure. So we are going to tackle a very cool subject today, which is incorporating UX writing into a technical documentation team, which, I have a feeling we'll have a little bit of contention about, so we'll see. But before we tackle that, I'm just wondering, Denise, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career path, kind of how you got to where you're at, and then your connection to today's topic?
Sure. Yes. Career path. Actually, my background, my degrees are in English, and I went from an English major. When I graduated, I worked for several years as a journalist and jumped from journalism to technical writing about 23 years ago. And when I made that jump, actually, I made it with Blackbaud. So Blackbaud is really the only company I've worked with as a technical writer. It's been, like I said, for 23 years now. But it was a very cool evolution that I got to witness at Blackbaud. When I was hired there, we were a smallish company, owned by one person. Just started growing to now we're a publicly held company. Our doc team, we started out with 10 or 11 tech writers. Now our doc team is about 30. Actually, we're not the doc team. We're the strategic content development team, and we've got about 30 members. We're responsible for all sorts of deliverables, and we always have been. We've always been responsible for the videos. We've always been responsible for the help system. We've done tutorials. Our stuff is also included in the knowledge base. So like I said, it's
very cool.
Interesting evolution.
Very cool. And Scott and I know a little something about journalism, so we'll have to compare notes.
Yeah, and Bruce Springsteen, although I didn't expect that to be on today's show, so I'm not prepared for Bruce, except for now I'm hearing Born to Run playing in the back of my in the back of my head. So, nice. Denise, you kind of told us a little bit about what the content team that you represent, which is called the Strategic Content Development Team, produces. But what is Blackbaud, just for the audience members who might not know what your software is? It a software company? What is it? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, Blackbaud, we're a software company. We do software deliverables primarily for nonprofit organizations. We help folks manage their constituents, their giving. We also have an offering for, we've got a learning management software as well. But I think most folks that know us, it's in relationship to our nonprofit management tools.
Very cool.
Also, I should just let you know, too, the company we're actually headquartered in Charleston, South Carolina.
Really?
I've worked remotely for So 23 years with Blackbaud and 18 of them remote. So I was remote long before COVID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of been cool the last, not that COVID is cool, but it's been kind of interesting the last year watching all of my coworkers go remote as well. It's made for me a nice work experience, seeing everybody at home, not just me.
Yeah, I bet it does make a difference when everyone's in an office and you're remote versus everybody remote. There's a different dynamic there for sure. So we're talking, of course, about UX writing today. And I do want to mention that we have a poll open that we hope will get everybody's answer to. And that poll question is really about whether we think technical writers should be responsible for creating UX content within your organization. Now, we know that there's a little bit of contention there, right? And I think, Denise, you said yourself that you've mentioned this before and you've gotten various responses, right? Some very positive, some very negative. And so I think it'll be an interesting topic, but if we could get answers to that poll question, that'd be great. Before you sort of tell our audience about your efforts to bring this UX writing under the technical communication banner, what does the term UX writing mean to you? What is it at Blackbaud? And then what type of content are your UX writers writing? And what kinds of content are they not writing? Like, how do you sort of differentiate technical writing from UX writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. At Blackbaud, when we're talking about UX writing, we're primarily talking about the embedded content in the application, and it's actually part of the UX design process, right? So, as the writers, as the folks who are contributing the text, we have to be involved in the design process from the earliest stages. Blackbaud's always been involved in writing the UI content. But the way it's happened in the past, right? For like the last several years, and it would be random. We're an agile house, so we all work on different development teams. And even though we try to be as consistent as possible with our development teams, there is some inconsistency. But by and large, the UX folks would do the design. The UX folks, the PMs, sometimes the developers would put the text in there, and then they kind of throw it over the fence to us and say, hey, can you take a look at this and clean it up and make it sharper? So, in a way, we've always kind of been involved with contributing this content. Now we're like more recognized as part of the process, and we're involved in the design, in the design process very early on, so that the content and the design are happening at the same time. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second half of your question, Megan. What was that?
No, I think you answered that. I guess
Okay.
Just sort of to further that. Would you say, like, what is it do you have technical writers that do something different, that actually write product content that's about the product, and then your UX writers focus more on the product itself, or are they working together in some way? So is there a collaboration there?
We actually wear both hats. So there's not a line division saying you are a UX writer, you are a technical writer. The folks who have worked as technical writers are technical writers and UX writers at the same time. As I mentioned, we've got roughly 30 people on our team now. Not everybody has participated in the UX writing. So right now we probably have roughly 10 people who are wearing the UX hat. And it'll eventually evolve. Our plan is eventually everybody should be wearing the UX hat. But we started slow because, again, we didn't lose our technical writing chores. We just kind of made what we've always been doing with UX, we made it official in this process, if that makes sense. By recognizing us as UX writers, because again, we've really almost always done some version of UX writing. It's just the process was different. We've now kind of formalized the process, and the company is now recognizing us as the UX writing component of the company.
Denise, how did this come about? Was there a trigger or something that kind of said, let's talk about this? How did you even broach this subject? How did this become something to talk about in Techcom?
About 2 years ago, I was reading articles talking about UX writing. I'll be honest with you, I want to say 2 years ago, and up until then, I remember it was the first time I heard the term UX writing, and it triggered me to thinking, it's like, okay, well, we're already doing this. This is something I think we need to formalize as part of the strategic content development team. I think this is something we should really start to formalize as something that we own. So I followed up with the director of our department, who was already thinking the same thing. So it was an easy sell at that level. And once everybody on the strategic content development team was on board, it's like, hey, look, we're already doing this. Let's start formalizing it. Then we started syncing up with the UX folks that we work with. Again, we've always had a really good relationship with the UX people, with our UX teams. And at the end of the day, right, the UX folks, especially the designers, the researchers, they don't want to create the content. The developers certainly don't want to create the content. So, when we showed up and we said, okay, we want to make this official, we're seeing this term UX writer out there all over the place. We want to be the official Blackbaud UX writers. We got, it was fairly simple to get the buy-in. Putting processes in place, that takes a little bit longer, but getting everybody on board and buying into that, this is the job we wanted, that was fairly straightforward.
That's awesome. So I did want to bring up some of the poll answers right now. So the answers so far have come out as 43% of people are saying, yes, of course, UX should be the same as technical writing. 41% said, well, maybe. So that's like 84% are fairly positive on it. 4% said, no way. And 9% said they're not really sure. So a lot more positive than I sort of thought would happen. So that's good.
And I would definitely come down on the it depends. I don't really think you could just come out and say, I don't know that, first of all, everybody who's currently wearing a technical writer hat really wants to do this. It's a very different discipline. It's a very different form of writing. And it's taken folks a long time to get up to speed on it. And one of the things we're discovering too, right, I think one of the biggest learning curves when you're coming from creating these long help deliverables, right? We create help systems, we create tutorials, we create getting started. And then all of a sudden you're just writing like just a handful of words for the UI or maybe for a pop-up or some sort of embedded help. It's short. It's so much harder to write short, concise, useful content than it is to write the longer stuff. And one of the struggles our writers have had, it's like, well, you're not going to think I've been working all day because, I've been working 3 hours on this and I have 6 words. And it's like, yes, but you've got the perfect 6 words. That doesn't come easy. So there is a little bit of a learning curve because at the end of the day, when you're done doing your UX writing, you don't have this big long file to show for it.
Yeah, that makes such a difference. I remember taking an advertising class a long time ago and really coming up with what our goal was in writing advertising copy was to say what you meant and would like to have a paragraph to say, and you had to say it in like 3 words. And that was such good training and the same thing for titles, right? In titles, they have to say a lot in very few words. UX writing is similar to that. You have to get the entire point across with 1 word, 2 words, maybe 3 words, right? And then adding to it the buttons and all the design that the designers are working on. It all just really works in unison.
It does. And okay, it works in unison. I'd like to follow up on that too, because that's kind of key to us. So, right, we're writing, and this is an argument why the folks who are responsible for the larger content library are good folks for the smaller ones too, the UX writing. We know everything that's out there. So when we're creating our UI text, it's like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to try and say this in 6 words. I'm going to be as succinct and clear as possible. And hopefully you don't have to leave the UI to do what you need to do. But because I know of everything else that exists, I can also incorporate that into my content. What would happen before is, right, the developers, the UXers, they don't know what we're doing. They don't know that maybe we have a tutorial for this because it's kind of complicated. So I think having us control and orchestrate all of this content has really worked to the user's advantage.
And Denise, it seems like that lesson right there isn't just limited to UX writing. What other roles might technical writers help fill in addition to UX writing? Have you thought about that? Is there some value for us participating in other kinds of roles that are really closely related to the customer experience that we could be useful in?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I'm going to say marketing. I know marketing really disagree with us on that, but I do. I do definitely. Our like I said too, our stuff is also in the KB, which is that supports territory. But they'll pull in some of our content as well. But when it comes to like expanding, I don't want to say our reach. I want to like maybe say expanding our coordination, and that's what we've been doing more of. We don't want to own the KB. Support needs to own the KB, but it's good that we know what they're doing. It's good that they know what we're doing. And again, as a result of maybe our expanded responsibilities of late, we've got a much better relationship with support and giving them feedback. Needless to say, the same thing with product management. Not so much with marketing, but maybe someday. Does that answer the question, Scott?
It does, and I'm so happy that you said marketing. But let me ask you, just as a tiny aside, why? Why do you think marketing? I've been saying this for years, and I have my own reasons. But I'm always interested in why. What aha moment do other technical communicators have when you go, you know what, this is marketing? It helps with customers. What did you? What triggered this revelation? I guess.
Sometimes I feel the marketing content doesn't really consider the user experience. It's too geared towards, oh God, I don't know what you would call it. You could tell I'm not a marketer, right? It's too geared towards catchiness. It's too geared towards getting their attention, and it's missing. It's kind of missing the forest for the trees, or however that goes. My biggest takeaway from marketing is sometimes they don't recognize the user experience, and they, at the end of the day, they not necessarily misrepresent something, but I don't think they represent it in its best light.
Yeah. So,
That makes sense.
I've sort of crossed between technical content and marketing throughout my entire career. And I remember many years ago, probably well over a decade ago, I remember doing a presentation about how I was talking to technical writers, and I was talking about how, yes, we think marketing content is too fluffy, but it needs to become more useful, and we can help them. And at the same time, we as technical writers, we're not that great at doing really engaging content. So we needed to learn from the marketers. I feel like the two have sort of come together in a really powerful way, where marketers today really do understand that they need to focus on the user experience. They don't always know how to do that. They certainly don't know how to do content reuse the way that we know how to do. They don't know how to do micro content the way that technical writers know how to do. But there's a lot of things that I think they're open to today that have really sort of helped your cause. And in fact, I believe UX writing really came out of marketing, right? So I think a lot of UX writers actually sit within marketing teams. So I think they get it. They just need our help. And to your point, it's got to be a collaboration. And then also with the support team, I see something really big happening right now, where you said we don't want to own the KB, right? I think that's true today, because support wants to own the KB. We need to own the long form product content. Totally agree with that. I do see in the future, and I'm just going to make a prediction here, I do think that the two of those will come together eventually, and you'll start to see basically digital support will be covered by a team, and it won't matter if it's KB on the support side, or if it's marketing content, or if it's training content, or if it's technical product content. I think all of that will eventually come together as sort of a digital enablement type role. That's my prediction.
That's interesting.
I like that prediction, actually.
Such different disciplines, though. Do you think it will work?
Well, I mean, they are different. However, they create a common thread for the customer, right? And so having oversight over all of these different things is super important, because your customer starts at one end of the journey, goes through to this end of the journey. And most products today are SaaS, which means a customer can leave at any time. So that journey that they have, the experience they have, that is marketing. That is sales, right? That is.
I mean,
so it is success.
Keep your customers, right? If you can't keep your customers, who cared that you earned them last month, right? Like, that was nice. We got to count somebody that we sold something to, but if you count how many people you sold something to that regret purchasing what you sold them, I think that's the number we're after. And technical communicators, back to Megan's point, we weren't asked to do that earlier, but now that we're starting to be able to measure performance of content. I think, Megan, you might be right. If we can align the performance of the content with the customer journey and then plug in the right content creators, whatever role you want to call them, as Denise says, it really doesn't matter what you call it, right? Yeah. It matters what their job is and do they understand what the consumer needs at that moment. I'm just happy that your team is doing this because it seems like a really good experiment to figure out what could go wrong with, blending them together. Because obviously we're going to learn lessons from your adventures here.
Yeah, and it's funny too. Megan brought up the point that UX usually sat with marketing. I think one of the reasons that we've been successful with this move is because we sit with the developers, the product managers, and the designers. We always have. We're embedded in the development team, and it gives us an interesting perspective, right? We get to see the product get built from the ground up, from the triad meetings when you're trying to figure out exactly what this is going to look like, all the way up until the release state. So I think watching the progression of the application or the development process helps a lot in creating the content. And I also think it's pretty important that the content be treated as part of the design process. And I don't know if you get that when you're sitting on the marketing side, right? Was when you're sitting on the development side and you're in those meetings from day one where they're trying to figure out exactly what this UI is going to look like and what's the label going to be and what exactly are we going to try to accomplish in the UI, so that the content has to be part of the design.
Absolutely.
In order for it to be successful on the UX side, I think.
Can you remind me, I think you may have already said this, but can you remind me who did the UX writing before the Techcom team took it over?
Nobody. No. So what would happen is during the triads, the triads, we were not part of the triads because the triad is when an agile process, the triad is made up of the designers, the PM, and the developer. So they would go in and the design process would be happening there. And then the three of them would kind of come up, by and large, right? It varied team by team, but the three of them would kind of come up with the content that was going to be in the UI. And then again, depending on the team and the product manager, sometimes it was tossed to us to clean it up. So, that was kind of our role before. It's like it was created in the triad with these folks, and then it was sometimes kicked to us to clean up. Sometimes it was never kicked to us to clean up, and we just kind of maybe, raised some heck when we were in some sort of a development meeting saying, oh my God, we got to do something with this text.
Yeah. But that's always fun. So this brings me back about probably 12 years ago now. I was working for a company and the engineers did what we would today consider UX writing. So they did their first take and then we would have to clean it up. And at one point they didn't give us a chance to clean it up. And what went out to the customers was this box where originally it said primary, server, let's say, secondary server. Well, they had to add 2 more. So the engineer, in his infinite wisdom, incredibly brilliant man, said, well, what comes after secondary? Tertiary, and then quaternary. So in the interface, it said, do you want the primary, the secondary, the tertiary, or the quaternary server, or whatever it was? And I was just like, oh, no, we can't do that. So I'm very glad that you're on it.
I know you had a question. Excuse me. I apologize for coughing on both of you. I know you had a question, Megan, about how Blackbaud delivers the content. How Denise's team does that. Can you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you deliver your content, are you delivering it into a unified portal? Are you pushing it into multiple sites? Are you putting it in the product? Where are you delivering it to?
Yeah, all of that.
Okay.
It's very complicated. And, because you have to, this is our first year, like we're officially wearing the UX writer role. But right now, when we do, if the content is embedded in the UI, that's held in a Get repo. It's a resource file in the Get repo, and most of the writers have access to that document in the repo. So we'll go in, and that's where the UI text is handled. But by and large, we don't even have to author it. Usually it's fixed in the development process, and we're good. And whoever the developer or whoever puts our content in there, but we do have access to the resource file. Other embedded help is primarily done. We use Madcap Flare is our primary authoring tool. And right now we're using Flare for everything. We use Flare for our tutorials, for our help systems. and for our other embedded help deliverables. Our other embedded help deliverable, which would fall into the UX writing, I guess, responsibilities, is we have like a little flyout. So we've got a progression with our help strategy. The first line of defense is, if we can accomplish everything we need in the UI, let's get some UI text in there. And if that's all we need, then we're moving on. There's no need to be creating help for a page that 6 or 7 words is going to do the job. If you need a little bit more help than that, we have a little, we refer to it as a flyout, and all it is we put a little help icon in a location that's useful. For example, maybe somebody might need some troubleshooting information if schedules aren't syncing up the way they're supposed to. They can click this help icon and this flyout shows up. We can create that. We create that in Flare as well. It lives on our web server, and the developers just point to our Flare content from there. So that's primarily how we do it. Like I said, we do the tutorials, we do getting started, and we do help systems all through Flare.
This seems like a good time for Megan to tell our audience a little bit about Zoomin software and how it connects to the topic of today's show.
Yes, absolutely. So Zoomin's platform ingests technical product content wherever it comes from. It doesn't matter the source. It could be from Flare. It could be data content coming from a CCMS. It could be unstructured content coming from Confluence or some other CMS. And we then ingest it, we unify all of it, we deliver it out into a modern documentation portal inside your community or customer service site, and even inside the product itself in something like the flyout that you talked about. And that way, our customers can really quickly and easily find the answers they need from all of the great content that we've been talking about today.
Excellent. And I want to remind our viewers that you can learn more about Zoomin software by visiting them on the web at zoominsoftware.com, or you can look in the attachments section underneath your webinar viewing panel. There's some links you can click on there for Zoomin content and some files you can download to learn more about the software. All right, so without further ado, let's dive into the problems, Denise, that your team was trying to solve by adopting these UX writing tasks. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, the biggest problem when we wanted to take over the role, the biggest problem was we felt we were wasting a resource, and that resource was the UI text. We weren't taking it seriously enough, and that was the one thing that was driven home when I was reading like I said, two years ago, wherever it was, when I started reading the articles about UX writing. We're just squandering a great opportunity. Folks, all the studies show how folks feel. If you want to make your clients happy, if you want to make your users happy when they're using software, is set them up so they can succeed. If they succeeded in creating a process, they're really pleased with themselves, they're pleased with the application, and they're more likely to go on and try to learn other stuff in your application. And so that's when we started thinking about it. And it's like, well, you know what, if we could start wearing the UX writer hat, and we could take ownership of this content, I mean, maybe we could be a little bit more successful at getting those users through the application without ever having to leave it for, a tutorial or a full help system. So that was the problem we were trying to solve. How big of a problem? It's hard to measure. I'm going to assume it was a pretty big problem because, a lot of our UI text doesn't really say a whole lot. Sometimes it's just repeating what's in the fields that are on that screen. Sometimes it's repeating what's in the label that's on that screen. It's like squandering this opportunity and just wasting real estate that could be used to really make the user feel successful and, promote their experience with our application.
Very cool.
And super important, as we all know, no matter whose responsibility it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody from the brand owes the customer that kind of respect and that kind of attention. So I'm happy that you're actually able to do that. Those were some interesting problems. Were there any problems with making, kind of trying to overcome the hoop jumping that we sometimes introduce to users when we inadvertently give them so much information that they end up having to jump around from place to place? Was this also kind of an approach of bringing people together in one place so they didn't feel so scattered when they were looking for information for help from you?
Well, without a doubt, right? Because again, if you can get it done in that one little environment, that's great. But if you can't, like I said before, right, the advantage our group has is we do know all of the other content that's out there. So we can kind of orchestrate the the help experience.
Yes.
Let's start with the UI text. We get done with UI text, we're kind of scratching our heads saying, I don't think that's quite enough. This level user might be okay with it, but this level user might need a little bit more. So let's provide them an opportunity. And maybe that's where the fly out comes in. And then within that fly out, it's like, okay, you know what, if you're a beginner user, you might want the tutorial, but we know we have the tutorial out there on the web server as well. So at the end of the flyout, we'll put a little link that'll take them to the tutorial. So it allows you to create, a unified help experience right from the application.
Nice. Denise, did you have any sort of baseline data that you started with, and how are you sort of testing along the way to make sure that they're jumping through fewer hoops than they used to jump through?
Yeah, good question. And unfortunately, we really didn't have a lot of baseline data to track this. We do now. We're implementing tracking now. We use Mixpanel within the application to keep track of this, and I'm not the Mixpanel person, so I'm probably going to slaughter the process that we have in place. But I know we try to keep track of people who hit the page, how many of them are hitting the flyout buttons, how many of them are hitting the links within the flyout buttons, stuff like that. So we do have tracking in place now, but unfortunately, we really didn't before. All we could do is look at the existing content, and we even knew how to use the application, and we would read the existing content and say, well, you know what, this doesn't really say anything, or this really isn't giving me any help to get me through this page.
Yeah, so you had basically anecdotal data that suggested that there were issues, and usually that's enough to go off of, right? Because you don't oftentimes have good, solid quantitative data that people aren't using your site, right? Or that they're having to jump through too many hoops that they cut out. As you get to things like, how often are they using the flyout? Well, is that good or is that bad? That's bad for the product, but good if that meant they did that before opening a support case, right? So it's sort of good and bad. It's not, there's nothing to it, but understanding the journey that they're taking is super, super important. So very nice.
And our stuff is now included in the discovery process that UX conducts. So, we're not, one of the things I like best about the new direction our help is taking, and this is something we had been trying to do for years, but it's really very difficult to do when you're not, we were the technical writing team. We didn't really have the resources to go out and do discovery work. So what do you do when you're a technical writer? You try to figure out the best way, what's the best thing that's going to help your customers? We would meet with support. We would get pain points. We did everything we could to help the users, but at the end of the day, we were guessing. Now there's a lot less guessing. Because of that relationship with UX, and because we're creating content that is directly related to the UX, design process, we're part of the discovery process as well. And the nice thing is this, right? It's kind of bled into our other deliverables. They're now helping us. We're trying to create a new resource center. 2 years ago, if my team was creating a new help resource center, we would just sit down and, scratch our heads, and we'd look and see what's Slack doing, what's, so-and-so doing, and start, borrowing and piecing together things, thinking we're doing the right thing. Now we have the UX folks helping us. So just the relationship and the extra closeness with UX has just been terrific. And I think beneficial across all of our help deliverables, because every time we bring something up, they're like, well, let's get this in front of some clients and see what they want. Don't just sit here and try to guess and figure it out on your own.
Denise, when we talked about problems, which was the last topic that we talked about, the flip side is usually opportunities, right? Were there any opportunities for the technical communication team resulting from this move that you've made? Things that maybe other teams could have as opportunities to help them grow as well?
I'm sorry, opportunities, you mean opportunities for our writers to?
Yeah, opportunities for the Techcom team. Megan and I like to try to showcase and elevate the technical communicators that we are talking to. And we feel like sometimes they don't see the opportunity they have to be really influential in their organization. So did your team have any opportunities to kind of showcase their value by kind of participating in this part of the journey?
Yes, definitely. And especially, we didn't, one thing I want to really make clear, right, is we rolled this out slowly. We've got 30 some people working on our, strategic content development team. Not everybody jumped in the pool at the same time. It was like 3 or 4 people at a time. And as a result, we've probably got 4 or 5 people on the team right now that are just killing it when it comes to the UX writing. And as a result of that, I mean, their status on the development team has definitely, they've become the go-to person. Their product manager, their go-to person for their product manager when they need feedback on the design process, because the words are so important in the design process. There's the visibility, I guess, is what I would say has increased the most. And the recognition, and also the recognition of our skills. It's like, okay, you know what, we were the help people, but it's like, we could do a little bit more than that. Plus, we've also had a lot of we've got one person on our team, probably another one, really, really interested in the UX component of what we're doing. The nice thing is they're not interested in leaving us and going to UX, but they're really invested in the discovery process. And Blackbaud has opened the door for them. So it's like, this is great. So, work with the UX person on the discovery process while we're trying to design this new resource center, or while we're trying to design this new template for our tutorial. So, so visibility and opportunities have both resulted from this process.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've really elevated your team. You've made it clear that the written word is really a strategic asset for your product and for your company, which is very, very cool. Something somewhat related that a couple people are asking about. They're suggesting that UX writing jobs have higher price tags than technical writing jobs, and therefore they're wondering if this gave them an opportunity to get a higher salary.
It's funny. Okay, all of our salaries have gone up substantially the last 2 years. I don't know that I can put it on the UX, the coronavirus, and the lack of, there have been so many pieces that have come together. But yes, I've definitely, especially because on the management side of things, I do get to see like some of the salary effects, and I've been quite stunned with what the increases have been. So you're right, because we're competing with a very different market now, and the price tag is high. And the nice thing is on our team, we're doing both. We've got folks who are just killing it with the UX writing. They're still killing it with their other deliverables. So yeah, their price tag is going to go up. I'm not really sure how that's going to affect us in the years to come. Ideally, we don't want to train all of our folks to be such killer UX writers that they're going to jump ship and go wear just the UX hat somewhere else and make a ton more money. We want to make sure they're happy and compensated with us, but that's kind of a difficult balance.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that UX writers do make more than technical writers. I haven't done the research. Scott, do you have any idea?
I was just going to say, we discussed this during our planning call, and I went on Indeed. I did not do a scientific study of salaries for anyone who wants to comment on what I'm going to share with you next. But what I did find was there were some remarkable salaries listed for a variety of technical communication jobs. There were equal salaries between jobs listed as UX writer for $135,000 a year and tech writer $137,000, very close. The responsibilities were often different. But on teams where it looked like they stacked on a bunch of responsibilities, those salaries were even higher. So if you were supposed to be able to do UX writing and data and content reuse, and you're supposed to speak French, you're going to get a great salary. If you find that right job.
Yeah. So especially if you can add information architecture to it. You bring in, data information architects are very difficult to find, right? Mm-hmm. So the UX side of the house hasn't really jumped on the data bandwagon yet. But when you start to look at the information architecture around it, if technical writers have that background, they are a dime a dozen, right? So not a dime a dozen. They're one in a million.
They're high demand.
I'm totally using them. They're not a dime a dozen. They're the opposite of that.
Yeah. They're much more than a dime a dozen.
Yes.
All right. Well, we've got a few more questions to ask, Megan. Do you want to start with the technology question, and then we'll meander through it, and then I think
we've covered most of that one. So let's move on. We do have a bunch of questions from the audience we want to get to too.
Let's tackle those.
Okay. There was a great one that brings us back to marketing. So somebody asked how you create awareness to the marketing team about the value that you basically as a technical communicator bring to the table, which is really interesting. And it kind of goes to what we just talked about, but how specifically did you bring your writers into the marketing world, or have you done that?
Right, that's the problem. I would say we really haven't succeeded with that. I don't really think we have that close of a relationship with marketing. And this is the thing. Okay, we're big. We have a big team. SCD is a big team. We have pockets. Because I'm thinking of a couple of writers right now who have very close relationships with marketing. And mostly it came about because marketing needed help with something. We were able to put a resource with them to work with them on it. They were really impressed with what, this writer was able to do. And now they keep coming back for more.
Very nice.
I could give you a different example, though, when it comes to sales. Again, not quite marketing, but we had no relationship with sales. COVID has actually improved our relationship with sales, because it turns out when our clients are having trouble struggling with something, they oftentimes go directly to their sales representative. So, and this is just kind of to expand the marketing question. So the sales reps would come to us and say they're pulling their hair out because we've got teachers out there who don't even know how to turn on a computer, and now they have to suddenly teach online. And we just started creating the resources that they needed. We created them really fast. We got them out, we got our teachers up and running, and now we've got this new open dialogue with sales. So we need something like that to happen with marketing. It's just a little bit slower in that case. But like I said, I know we have pockets at Blackbaud where, because we've lent out the resource and they've helped them out, that they've come back for more. So it's just a matter of us doing more of that. But the biggest limitation with everything is just time.
Yeah, I'll give you a hint with marketing.
Yes.
One of their key indicators that they look at is SEO, right? Because they want to make sure they're getting in front of people. And what I found, especially with our Zoomin customers, the Zoomin site always becomes mission critical. We have, like, for example, ServiceNow is one of our customers, and they have 75% of their traffic goes through the doc portal, as opposed to the 16%, I think, that goes through their .com site. So that can be huge. So when you start talking about driving traffic, and especially tackling SEO for them, product content does become the new marketing, right? Product content becomes the thing that generates buzz for them, so that they can start to bring the people in where they need to get leads.
And from my vantage point, I edited a special edition of the Intercom magazine for Society for Technical Communication in the previous year about sales enablement, or taking our content and enabling salespeople to grab the answer quickly, but have it be the right answer that we want to give people in a way that's understandable, instead of them taking their best shot at it, which is a nice thing for them to do, but isn't always as accurate or as good of an experience as if we controlled it ourselves. So connecting to sales, I think, is really key. Denise, have you seen the salespeople have any ahas that were remarkable to you, that where you knew that they saw the value?
Yeah, we did from the very first thing we delivered with COVID, because, like I said, it was a terrible. It was that the March when everything shut down and all the teachers went remote, and they just never used the online software. In the teaching profession, it's kind of complicated, right? Sometimes you have the learning management software there to use, and maybe they're forced to use it for grades, but that's it. Well, all of a sudden, right, they had to do the teaching online, they had to do the discussion boards online, and from the very first deliverable that we kicked over to sales, which I believe was a video, because we also found out too the teachers preferred videos to the other forms of help. There was definitely an aha moment with, like, oh my goodness, you could do this. Oh my goodness, you have this stuff. And here we are a year and a half later, and that relationship is still going strong and solid.
That's awesome.
Here's a question from a viewer. Denise, how do you deal with the difference between marketing and UX writing end goals? Manipulate the customer, as apparently the marketing goal, to consume more or convert more, versus help the customer do what they want to do.
This is the thing where this is a software product. We don't really try to manipulate the customer in the software product. The goal with the text that lives within the software application has always been to help the user complete a task. So we've not really run into that problem. I'm going to assume this is UX writing primarily for retail. I don't know, but we've never used our UI contact to try and manipulate the customer, or, for lack of a better term, that's not really the term, but to try and sell them.
Yeah.
We do sometimes run into problems with PMs wanting to, like, like, isn't this great kind of stuff, which I guess kind of falls into the marketing bucket, and they want exclamation points and like, look how happy we're making you. That's an occasional battle, but not one we often have. So, but marketing really doesn't have much of a place within our software application. I hope that makes sense.
Maybe that's something that changes over time as we start to understand one another better. And the reason I ask that is, or comment about that is, I think a conversion isn't always about give me your money. I think a conversion can be about, hey, I'm on this page and it's version 4 of your software, but that version 5 came out, and I'm looking to solve a problem in version 4. And if a little tool tip or a pop out or something that you could interject in there might say, hey, you could overcome some of these problems by upgrading to a new version. I think that's helpful if you don't beat them over the head with it and don't chase them around, right?
Yeah, I agree. And we don't participate in any of that. So I can honestly say, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure, this is terrible. I'm not sure that Blackbaud has that. We're a SaaS company. Most of our folks don't even have the option. They subscribe. They go to bed one night and the new version is up. So I'm not really sure how much marketing we even have in the application. I'm sure we do have some, and I'm just not aware of it because we're not participating in it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's a lot of moving pieces, as you mentioned, and all that configurable content is challenging to manage under the best of circumstances.
And I really do think that's why marketing and product content or technical communication and support or success are really coming together to build that customer journey. And it really is the experience economy, right? We no longer can say marketing is pre-sales and then tech content is post-sales. That's not the case anymore. Tech content is absolutely pre-sales, and marketing can absolutely impact post-sales. So it's a different world, and you just have to look at the entire experience, don't you?
No, you do. And as I mentioned before, our weakest spot would be marketing, as you can see, because I don't really know much about our marketing process and what we do. And they've not really, with the few exceptions, we've not really done a lot of work with them. So yeah,
I bet when you get off this call, you're going to go send an email to your marketing folks and say, "Hey, we should have a conversation." Right?
It's true. It's true.
Nice.
We always think training. We always think support.
I was just going to say, we're almost out of time, so I want to make sure that we tackle as many customer questions as we can. And here's one of them. It's kind of a crystal ball question, so you can share with us what you think your psychic power will allow. Do you think that UX writing remains a separate profession, or is just another skill in the Techcom's toolbox? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think it's going to. I would say a separate skill by and large. I mean, I think it's just going to become part of UX. You've got the UX researchers, you've got UX designers, you've got UX writers. So I would think it's going to probably more likely stay in that branch. But it's a tough one. I don't know. What I don't want to see is that companies are making folks do UX writing when they're already you've got your technical writers who are drowning in work, and it's like, hey, here's another chore for you. Although I don't really think that will happen, because you guys already brought up the price issue. I think people who start doing this are going to require a lot more money, but I don't really think it'll become a solid part of tech writing. But it is, when you guys look at all the, it's like we've got so many different writing disciplines that keep coming up. Now with bots, we've got conversation designers. I saw that the other day, and we're kind of looking into that because we know we're going to have to go the bot route, and is that something we should be doing? We're not really sure. That's the next hat that we're investigating, is what our responsibilities are going to be in the bot. Because again, right, we know the whole journey when it comes to help. Maybe we should be there, maybe not. I don't know.
I applaud that. Yes. We should be there.
Absolutely.
I don't know whether we should take over or not, but I definitely think we have beneficial information to share. And I think we have skills and approaches that we've developed as a discipline over the years that could be beneficial to the other teams. I mean, what happens when you have a million topics to manage? You need a content management system designed around topics. What happens when you have a million pieces of micro content to manage?
Yes.
I think that's where we're at. Like, we have to think through what's our role, and it isn't always about the typing of the words. It's about assembling them and presenting them and managing them and tagging them and all those other things.
Oh
Yeah.
no, and in many cases equally as important as the words, because if you don't do that correctly, you could have the best words possible and it's not going to do any good.
Right. Especially if you have the best words possible and your bot has the best words possible, but those are two totally different messages, right? The inconsistency for the customer is huge. So this actually brings me to one of the questions that our audience has asked, and that is, how do you measure these tech writer / UX writer people? Is it really about efficiency? Because of course in Techcom, we're worried about efficiency because we have to put out a lot of words, right? But we also have to worry about the outcomes that we get, the customer experience outcomes, CSAT, the NPS score. We have to worry about how things are laying out, the consistency across all of this content, right? So how are you measuring these folks today?
Measuring them success-wise or measuring them work-wise?
Both. Tell us both.
Well, success-wise, that's an open question, right? Yeah, we're really, I don't know that we have anything in place for that right now. Like I said, most of the stuff does go through discovery, so we have that. Afterwards, we do have some usability work that's done, so we go through that. But there's, when it comes to measuring the success, we are putting a lot of pressure onto Mixpanel, right? It's like, okay, so if I see this person has landed on this page, they read the UI text, we're going to assume they didn't click anything else and they moved on. But, it's tough, because is that really success, or did that person just already knew what they were doing? And we don't know, right? So we do have Mixpanel, we've got the analytics that we track on that level, but I always just take that with a grain of salt. I mean, I think it's good information, but it's not the perfect information. When it comes to work, tracking folks' work, all of our work is project based. So everybody has their projects that they're responsible for. The UX component is part of that, and it's just like anything. I mean, some folks who are just really great at it, they have very large projects there, and they're always asking for more. So that's kind of how we do it. It's like, okay, these are your projects, please get them done. If you're running into problems where you need help, we'll get you help. But most of the time, folks are pretty good with it. They just had to kind of rearrange their work to be able to wear both hats. And like I said, not everybody on the team is doing UX writing right now. Probably, I want to say about 10 folks, and they're willing to put in, the 10 folks that are doing it. I know they're putting in extra effort. This is the one, just real quick, this is the one way we got folks really up to speed on UX writing, is we have weekly, we call them office hours. So folks who are working with their designers to get the content just perfect. If they have a problem, they come to office hours, and myself and another person who's been leading the UX writing effort, we kind of swarm around the problem, come up with the best solution, and it really, really works well. Plus, everybody on the team is invited. We usually only have like 6 or 7 people, but it's more of like a brain trust coming up with how best to present this content. But just based on my experience there, I know the folks who are doing the UX writing and taking it seriously are probably putting in a few more hours than normal.
That's so true. So when you come to, sorry, Scott, when you come to measuring your writers, you clearly aren't going to go back to our journalism days where we counted the words per inch or whatever. That goes out the window, because again, it's harder to write in 6 words something that you could. It's the old, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time adage, right? Like it takes a lot longer to kind of squish it into a smaller amount. So you don't want to go by the length, but I love that you're focusing on the project and the outcome of the project, because if they can get your project team to the outcomes it needs, then they're good. And if they're holding them back, then maybe they're not so good, right? Right.
We've not experienced that yet. So yeah, we've been really lucky.
Beautiful.
But the one thing I did want to mention too is, to be successful at this, you have to have a really good team, and you've got to have people who want to do it. And we've been so lucky with that. I mean, we've just folks love, I keep hearing from writers on our team how much they like doing this process. It's so different from what we do on our, but we've been doing it a daily basis. They're like, okay, this is a nice break. I've been doing this for like the last 4 hours. I'm going to finish up the day working on this. But the talent is key. You've got to have talented people, and you've got to have motivated and engaged people. And by and large, we've been really, really lucky in that respect.
One of our viewers wanted to know, did you have some kind of learning happen between UX-minded and trained people and technical communicators about like the basics of UX, so that the tech writers would not just come in and say, let me help you redo the words, but they would kind of understand the context of how they're working within UX?
Good question.
We did. We did that. We did that earlier this year. So I think I mentioned, like I said, I started reading about this a couple of years ago. I started doing some research on it. Once my director was like, yep, this is what I've been thinking too. This is the direction we need to go. A couple of us really essentially trained ourselves, but we also got to work closely with the UX, with our UX folks at Blackbaud. So between that, we did get up to speed, and then we did, we have done some random training for the other folks on the team who are interested in this. Plus, like I said, we've had a lot of success. Just, it's one of those things, you're going to learn it. You're going to learn it by doing it. So you get the basic training done, but after that, it's kind of like a finesse process. And that's one of the things we try to accomplish with our office hours every week, is like doing that final finessing. Plus, our UX team, they've got patterns in place. They've got best practices in place. We follow all of that. We didn't have to recreate, recreate the whatever it is you recreate, because it was already there. The patterns have been a huge help. Whenever there's a debate, we're like, go look at the patterns. What's this button supposed to say? It's a pattern. We don't have to recreate the wheel every time we're writing something.
Excellent. Well, and I think that's going to have to be the last word, Denise, because we've got more questions than we have time. And thank you, audience members, for asking. We really appreciate it. We tried to cram as many in as possible. I know that we'll ask Denise to come back and join us at another show, because we definitely know she's got tons to say. We'll hope that you'll join us on September 14th, 2 weeks from now. We're going to chat with Kathy Clemens. Let me show you a little bit about this. She's a super great expert who's going to talk to us about the lessons she's learned building content teams at some of the biggest companies in the world. You're definitely going to want to tag on to that one. It'll be a great discussion, and you'll come with some excellent lessons learned. Kathy works at a company called Blackline, and she's going to share her lessons learned building content teams, and she'll provide some suggestions for how you avoid some potential roadblocks when you're going about doing so. And I just wanted to let you viewers know that we really appreciate all the feedback that you've given us and the questions, and we wish we could have more time to get to them all, but you've been too good at submitting questions today.
Yes, it's been great. And before the audience signs off, I want to make sure we get more feedback, because we want to make sure that this is really helpful for the audience. So use the Rate This tab that's located in your webinar viewing panel. Give us a 1 to 5 star rating. Definitely add a comment. We read every single comment. If you have questions, you can add them there, and we'll try our best to get back to you. If we've got a ton of them, it may take a while, but we'll try. And other than that, we really want your feedback so that we know, how you like the show and how we make our show better.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And thank you, Denise, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It was good talking to you. Bye-bye.
And thanks to our audience. You've been watching Blending UX Writing with Technical Documentation with our special guest, Denise Kadilak, who shared with you some of her lessons learned from how her Tech Docs team at Blackbaud is taking on UX writing. We hope that you've got some ideas for future shows as well. And if you do, please share them. You can send me a note or leave in the feedback in the ratings section of your webinar viewing panel your idea or a guest that you'd like us to have on a future show, and we'll be happy to try to get them on. We've got a whole program coming up, Megan and I, for 2022 that we're creating for you right now. So we're excited to give you some new shows in the new year as well. So you've been watching the Content Advantage show, and this show has been recorded. Shortly after you sign off, you'll get an email in your inbox that will encourage you to come back and use the link to watch a recording of the show. You can also share that recording with somebody else who might like to watch when they've got some free time, and we hope that you'll do that. On behalf of myself and my co-host, Megan Gohili, I'd like to thank you for making time to watch our show today. We really hope you'll join us for upcoming episodes and suggest topics and view some experts that you think would make great guests on our future shows. We'd love to invite them and bring them to the stage. Until then, we'd like for you to be safe, be well, and keep doing great work. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Scott Abel, signing off from the Content Wrangler. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at a webinar again soon.
Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Bye.
Guys, bye-bye. Thanks a lot.